Hello everyone and welcome to another Sample Spotlight review. In today's video we will be looking at LA Modern Percussion, which was developed by Ollie. LA Modern Percussion features 25 gigabytes of content, which includes 9 microphone positions, as well as 4 perspective stereo mixes and 1 main stereo mix. With over 100 patches, this library was developed in collaboration with Performance Samples, and it was mixed by the award-winning sound engineer Alan Meyerson. Building off of what has been done before, Ollie and Performance Samples created a large and cohesive collection of Epic Percussion, designed to construct those massive percussive beds we've grown to love in cinematic music. LA Modern Percussion features multi-sampled solo and ensemble percussion instruments, as well as phrase-based loops ranging from improvised performances to simple fills. This library is dedicated to being a one-stop shop for all your epic percussion needs. Okay, so here is the main instrument page when you load a patch up. As you'll see here in the top, you have a mixer, a modulation page, an advanced page, and an effects page. There's also the ability to save and load presets, a nifty little information icon to learn what each thing does. Over on the left side, you have tabs that cover certain things like the individual mic positions, the mixes, then there's this alignment control, and then you can reset everything back to their default. So basically, everything is super easy to get to. Everything you need really is on this main page, unless you want to do advanced manipulation such as transposing, velocity changes, adjusting the pitch, so on and so forth. There's tons of control in this library. It's pretty awesome for that. In the modulation page, there's control over an AHDSR parameters through a high-pass filter, low-pass filter, and then there's a different level control for each parameter. There's also a high-pass cutoff and low-pass cutoff, and then this note initiates, which I can't remember what that is right off the top of my head, but basically, here we go. It prevents consecutive notes from overlapping. So pretty nifty little tool to kind of keep from that phasing effect happening. I love companies that put these little information bubbles in their patches so you can quickly figure out what something is. Okay, so let's kind of talk about just a simple functionality. For me, I had some difficulties using this interface. Yes, it's easy to use in terms of what they have offered to you. However, there's a lot of little things. I'm using a 2K resolution monitor, and sometimes if my mouse isn't right on, if you can see here, I'm clicking so close to this, but I'm not getting any kind of control. I wish they made the tolerances for where you need to click on here a little bit bigger, because as you can see how big my mouse icon is, I'm zoomed in this video. The size that they are using is the standard contact width, so this is pretty tiny. My only other complaint is also visually it's difficult for me to see. I wear glasses. I'm corrected to 20/20, and even with my glasses on, I have a hard time even making out what this says here. I know it says percussion, but it's just the way the lighting is with the dark, and then it's kind of like a muted white for some things and the super gray. It's just hard to see. So I wish that they could maybe go back and look at different ways to make this a little bit more accessible, especially to visually impaired composers. Other than that, the sound, I'll get into that later. But all in all, everything is easy to use. You can learn MIDI CCs for this. The standard kind of controls that we're all used to, control clicking sets it to default. One of the nice features that they included in this interface was this alignment tool. Now what this does is it looks at, they've gone through and they figured out what is the delay time between the transients, between the close mics to the far mics, and the same goes for the different mix options here. Basically, if you want to get a tighter sound, you just grab this and you tighten it up. It's pretty pretty gnarly. So this makes it nice, everything nice and lined up, and you get just a big, full, huge sound that way. If you don't do that, you get a more natural sound, but you get less of that aggressive tack. With all the microphones happening, you get more of like a, not necessarily a flam, but you just hear that kind of space and that delay that you would get in a scoring stage. Other than that, everything else is laid out. You get access to everything on these individual tabs. The same for all of these. There's not a lot of menu diving, which is good. Also, you can, in this effects page, you can bypass and solo individual mixes to be manipulated by the effects, which is a really nice feature to include. And then, of course, the ability to save and load presets is pretty awesome. So really basic. I love simple interfaces. I think that is the key to a good product, is just keeping things super simple. They have not locked these patches, so you can dive into the background for those of you that know what you're doing and adjust and manipulate effects and the samples directly that way. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say about the interface. One wonderful feature about this library is that they've included multiple stereo mixes. In the main page here, which is what comes up when you load this patch, you have a full-on stereo mix, which was mixed by Alan Meyerson, and then he also did 4 different stereo mixes. One with a close sound, more of a room, kind of like a mid-room, more of a room, and then an ambient mic. So I'm just going to go and demo each of them here. Here's the standard stereo mic, and I'm going to play it up here. Okay, now that is the standard stereo mic. Here's what the close mic sounds. As you can see, it kills the stereo mix. Here we go. Here's the close mix. There we go. Here is the mid mix, which you can mix between all 4 of these, which is wonderful. One of the things I like about the close mix is that it's nice and tight, very focused, and it has a very wide sound to it, which is pretty cool. And I'll manipulate some of these to kind of show you some of the mixes that I like with this. Here's the room mix. And then here is the ambient mix. Okay, now here is just a nice mix between the close and the mid-room, and we're going to tweak that up just a bit. Here we go. This is one of the sounds I like because it's nice and focused and very aggressive. So if you need some good epic sounds, I feel like that's a really nice one because it's not too wet, and it gives you nice control over the body of the sound. Here is close with the room, and kind of doing the same style. You can kind of hear the difference here. Now that to me is just a little bit too much of the wide kind of room sound. Now here's with the ambient. I like this one for one reason, and that's because the ambient mics are kind of a wide sound, which kind of matches that with the close. So this almost acts as just kind of like a extra bit of reverb and room kind of warmth in there. So let me do this, turn that to default. We'll kind of tailor the mid-room there, and then here we go. Now, not only did this library come with the multiple stereo mixes, but there is a great deal of microphones included. As you can see here, there are 9 total. Basically, I'm just going to go down the list here, kind of playing a very vaguely similar pattern, and then I'll try to do a little tweaking to kind of get a nice sound. So here is the stereo left front. Here is the right front. Here's them together. Here's what I suggest we do. So there we go. All right, and here is the stereo left rear. And then the right rear. Now, let's do this mix. Now, if I was working in a quad setup, I would probably route these specifically to a certain speaker in my environment, but I don't. I just have a stereo setup. So that's a nice close sound. All right, let's deactivate those. Here is our overhead. I wonder if that's a ribbon mic. I wonder if they recorded that with a ribbon. That sounds really warm to me. Okay, here is a mid-room. There you're starting to get a lot of the the reflections kind of pinging off the walls, and that's where that kind of bright, epic sound comes from, is from the room. So if you mix these two together, kind of a nice sound. Here is the room mic. Let's hear these two separately again. And then here is the wide mic. And then here's ambient. Again, the ambient kind of has a wider sound. You know, these 4 don't sound... They're very close. You can tell a little bit of a difference. For me personally, I would kind of use these just to kind of add a little bit of warmth to it. But I would probably stick with those 2 and the overhead of these and a little bit of the ambient. Down here. I thought I would run you through a few patch examples of kind of what's included in this library. The first and most important patch that I think comes in with each drum and or percussion instrument is the dynamic hits. The key range here, which gives us the lowest dynamic to the hardest. And basically, if you play up the keyboard, you can get a nice crescendoed roll. The next is this range here. It's simply a velocity based, and it has each velocity layer mapped on both keys. So you get the full range, the full dynamic range of the instrument. Sometimes you get some phasing. They thought about this, and that's why they created these 2 keys. This F here, it plays all of the odd numbered dynamics, so 1, 1, 3, 5, 7, so on and so forth, and then the G plays the evens, so 2 or whatever. So basically, this key is always going to be slightly louder. Like all the hits on there are going to be slightly louder than the drums on this one. But you can do flams and everything, and you won't get any phasing. I love it. That's really good for finger rolls. And then if you using them in combination, you can do a lot of grooves, and it just works when you're trying to input some things very quickly. So let's move on. This patch is one of the fills patches. This is the Doombeck Ensembles, played hard, and to give you an idea, the playable range is down here, and you have multiple options in terms of how this works. So what you get here is like a key switch. This key switch basically cuts into the individual sample that you've selected, and it allows you, if you play that sample, okay, that's our dun dun dun, and then if you cut into it, you get the last two, and this should be the last one. So you get that little bit of a ringing from the previous hit going into that, and you can switch back. So this is kind of a nifty feature. For instance, you hear that, there's a lot going on there. You might need to cut into it and just get the last two hits. So I love that they've incorporated this kind of like little mini editor, so you can quickly just splice into the individual hits of each fill. Every fills patch has this, and every fills patch is synced to your host tempo. They usually do, there's 120 and 170. Those are the ones that I've seen, and you've got to be careful on the lower tempo. The slower you get, the more artifacts that show up. The same going too fast with the slower ones. You kind of start to hear a little bit to that in that. I wish they would maybe consider doing 90 BPM, 90 or 80 BPM fills as like an update or something. I don't know what their plans are for updating this library. So that's basically how the fills work. They included shakers into this library, which is wonderful because I feel like for any percussion library to be worth its weight, it needs to have some of those ticky-tickies. I don't know how many times I use shakers in the scores that I've worked on, especially for action sequence. They just help kind of keep the driving momentum of a cue going. So here we have an example of a phrase ender patch. This is the Taiko Ensemble Rims. Now, as you can see here, it's mapped all across up here. I don't know if these were derived from the improvs or what, because there isn't an individual rims, like multi-sampled patch. There's fills, and they're definitely included in like the improvs, but I'm pretty sure these probably came from the improvised patches. But basically, this is what this sounds like. As you can hear, there's kind of like a little whoosh sound going in. These are really good for just tagging at the end of a phrase, because it just is a nice clean. It's almost like it's a release sample that you can just pop on at the end. You do need to adjust your MIDI data ahead of the beat to compensate for that. But I actually like using these almost as they're an actual rim effect in ahead of it, so it kind of sounds like a little bit of that like reverse effect, kind of going doom sha doom, except it's much faster. But it gives a nice effect. So all of the phrase ending patches have that kind of effect to them. So it's good to know when you are sequencing your own MIDI parts to compensate and know that you need to adjust accordingly. So use them, either as an effect or use them as intended for the end of phrases, because that's, I think, what you would get the most out of. Okay, and then the last one I want to show you is the Puili patches, or Puili. I've never known them to be called that. I'm a percussionist too, but I've never been a part of like a big, Epic Percussion ensemble. We just called them dreadlocks or something like that for those sounds. So, okay, so what this is basically, like I said, a bundled group of sticks, thin sticks, and they create an awesome sound like this. So again, the surdos, and I can show you here, the sound of surdos is much more aggressive, especially in the ensemble. So the Puili patches give you that higher end sound, and these can work really well as those ticky-tickies. And if you use them in combination with each other, you can get a nice wide range of the harmonic, or excuse me, the frequency spectrum of these percussion instruments. So the fact that they included these is definitely key, and one of my favorite aspects of the library actually are those types of patches. Okay, here's one of the improvs patches. And this is the Taiko Ensemble Puili improvs at 170 BPM. You can't see it off screen here, but the contact BPM is set to 170, so I'm going right with the tempo. These are awesome. Now, one of the things they did here, and it took me a long time to figure this out, and I had to kind of go fishing through their video, is the way they've created this patch is there's just one improv, and that's on the lowest note here. Each other note goes up, and it basically cuts into the next hit, and then when you get all the way to the top, it kind of catches the end and then repeats the whole phrase again. So it allows you to cut into the phrases, but I had a hard time with these staying, glued to your host tempo. There definitely is some tempo fluctuation. So if you're trying to sequence something and then you're trying to layer these over the top, they just didn't sync well. Some of them did. Some of them kind of went out of sync a little bit and then came back in. So I would say, that it needs a little tweaking in terms of how these are edited to tempo, because I felt like they just weren't working right. And I have sent a support ticket. I haven't heard back yet at the time that I've recorded this. I'm going to probably do one future video covering my one of my demos in a little bit more detail. So if they do respond, I'll try to include some information in there about their findings of the things that I've pointed out. So that's kind of basically it in terms of the patches and what's available. It's not consistent through all of them except for those dynamic hits. Everything else kind of varies. Sometimes you can get fills, some don't have fills, some have improv, some don't. It's kind of hit or miss in terms of those patches. Most also have a traditional hits and rolls, which is basically your standard velocity-based hits, and then there's a roll feature with mod wheel capability to swell up. In terms of these improvs, it would be nice if they included the hits up here, whether it be the phrase enders or actual single multi-sampled hits, to be able to kind of add some impacts and moments into these phrases on the fly without having to go to another track or something. But that's kind of basically my thoughts on that. Okay, so my final thoughts on this library is that it does what it does very well. In terms of Epic Percussion, and I use that term epic lightly because
it doesn't need to be loud to be epic. This does it both. It can go loud and aggressive, and it can go soft and pulled back and reserved and be super effective. I love that aspect of it. The some of my negative critiques would be the interface. It just is too dark. It's too small. It's hard to see what some of it is saying, because the contrast between the black and kind of the off-white makes it, or the muted white makes it difficult for me to see. So I kind of find myself squinting or leaning in. For those of you that might be working on 4K monitors, this might be an issue, especially those that have different type of visual impairments. It could prove to be a little bit of a difficult library to use. So hopefully the developers can take that criticism and update it for the better, to make it more accessible for visually impaired people. Another one of my negative critiques would be the loops, or the improvs. They just don't nail it to the beat. And if you're wanting to sequence orchestral arrangements around it, I found myself doing it in frustration. But there's it just is. It is what it is. If they are able to fix that or make some type of changes to help, add like a feature on the interface to kind of tighten it up to make sure that certain hits are always nailing it on the beat, that would be great. And other than that, for me, this is one of the first libraries in a while. It's been a few years where I was like, yeah, I need to put that in my template right away. It is exactly the type of cinematic percussion that I've been needing, and the workflow and how it's designed fits that perfectly for me. Being able to do the mapped dynamic range on the keys plus the velocity sensitive keys in combination with each other just makes sequencing with this library super easy and fun, to write those parts. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this review, and stay tuned for more. Also, I'd like to introduce you to one of our newest members of my family. This is Harry. Harry, say hello. Thanks again, everyone, for watching this review. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to my channel. There's going to be a lot more new content coming, whether it be tutorials or reviews. I appreciate it, and I hope you like the kind of new format that I'm going for with this channel. Thanks again, and you guys are awesome. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.